Hey everyone, in the previous video I talked about different types of table functions that are available in DAX and those functions that actually return distinct values when they are used in a given filter context. So in this video, as promised in the last video, let's understand when and how these functions will actually return different values if in case a blank row is added into the model. So how can a blank row get added into the model? And to answer that, we have to go to the Power Query. So if I go back to the Power BI file and go to Power Query, and before that you can see that distinct count, no blank, values and summarize are all reporting the exact same number at different cells, whereas all no blank row, all selected and all except are reporting 16 for each cell of that report, because these functions actually ignore the filter context, whereas distinct and distinct count, values, summarize, they actually respect the filter context. Now let's go back to the Power Query so that we can remove certain rows from the products table so that we can manually add that blank row into the model and see how it impacts these functions. So let's go to the Power Query, and what I need to do is in the products table I'm going to remove certain rows of different colors. So let's select black, red and white, and that should be enough. And if I click on close and apply and go back to the Power BI file, you can see that all these functions have now started reporting different numbers. Distinct count and distinct count no blank are actually reporting the exact same value at each cell of that visual, whereas values is now showing a different result, whereas a blank row is also added on the top of those product color names. And you can see that summarize is also behaving in the same way as the distinct function. And if you remember in the previous video, I told you that sometimes I see people using summarize for summarizing only one column, whereas they could have easily used values. So this is one of the difference that you have to keep in mind while you are using summarize and values. And at the end of the video, I will show you why there is a difference between values and summarize and how it can impact your end result or the calculations that you're going to make. And you can also see that all and all no blank row are now reporting different values. As the name suggests, all no blank row is not counting that blank row, whereas all selected and all except are actually respecting that blank row. So let's go to the products table and see if a blank row is already there or not. So if I go to the data model view and if I click on products table and let's filter out any of the column, you can see that we do not see any field which says blank row or blank in the brackets. So how do we know that a blank row is getting added into the model? So one way of doing that is we can create a new calculated table. So I can click on new table, and if I select any column of the products table, so for starting let's select products color, and if I press enter, you can see that towards the end there is a blank row, but that was not there in the products table before. So if I click on filter the products color column, you can see that there is no blank row here. So why is that blank row getting added into the model? And before that, let's also see if distinct is actually returning that blank row or not. So if I write distinct, you can see that distinct actually ignores that blank row. And let's use one other function, which is all. You will see that all is also considering the blank row as was being done by the values function. So let's go to the diagram view and see what is actually happening. So in analysis services, or all the products that run on analysis services such as SSAS, Power Pivot and Power BI, what actually happens is that if there is a row in the sales table, or you can say on the many side, which doesn't have an relationship on to the table on the one side, then what DAX engine actually does is it actually adds a blank row towards the one side. So in this case, since I have removed red, white and black colors from the products table, but there are some transaction in the sales table that actually belong to those colors, the DAX engine is not actually able to build a relationship between those values that do not have a corresponding relationship in the products table. And to resolve that, what DAX engine actually does is it adds a blank row that is technically hidden from us towards the one side, so that any row on the many side can be grouped and summarized in that blank row. So let's assume that you have some kind of total sales calculation and you remove some colors from the products table. So the blank row will consolidate all those values, all those sales amount for those rows in the sales table that do not have a corresponding relationship in the on the one side. And that is one of the reasons why we see a blank row being used by the values and all function and not the distinct and the distinct count function, because these function actually ignore blank row, whereas values and all functions actually respect that blank row. And not only that, so the blank row doesn't actually stops at the products table. It will be added to the products subcategory and the products category table as well. So let me just show you. If I go back to this table and instead of products color, I write products subcategory, and let's select any column, and if I press enter, you can see that towards the end there is a blank row. And if I select the filter, and on the top you can see a blank between parentheses. And let's select any column from the products category table. So I can select products category, and let's wait for it to run. And you can see that even the products category table has a blank row in that. So this was one of the reasons why I actually wanted to show that why a blank row is getting added to the model that we have, and how different functions are actually going to use that blank row, and then they can actually mess up your calculation if you do not understand which function actually respects the blank row and which functions actually ignores the blank row. So I hope the difference is now clear, and now we can see some calculations where the difference will be evident. So let's get to the model view, report view, and then we can create some measure and understand how the calculation is varying for different functions. Before moving ahead, let me just show you that the cross filter direction of the relationship doesn't have any impact whether the blank row will get added or not. So in the one-to-many relationship with a single cross filter direction, you have already seen that all is considering the blank row. But what if we change that to both? And let's select both and let's click on OK. And you can see that it still considers the blank row. And what if we make the relationship inactive? So let's select that and click on OK. And you can see that it still gets added. The blank row is still getting added to the one side of the data model. So one thing is clear, that the cross filter direction of the relationship doesn't have any impact on whether the blank row will get added or not, as well as the inactiveness or the activeness of the relationship also doesn't have any impact on the blank row. And let's see, if we change the cardinality to the many to many, will that have an impact on the blank row? And if I click on OK and go back to the model, you can see that now the blank row is not getting added to the one side of the table. So this is because of the concept of expanded table, because when you use many to many, the tables are not expanded, but when you use one to many, the table expansion actually happens. And let's see, if we change that to single and click on OK, then again you can see that in that scenario as well, the blank row is not getting added. So this is something that I wanted to show you, that when you're designing the model, make sure that all the line items of your dimension table actually matches to all the transaction in your fact table. And if in case you are not able to design a data model in that way, then just make sure the function that you use is actually returning the correct value or not. Okay, so now I'm back into the report view, and what I have already done is I have created 3 measures so that we can save some time. And in these measures, I'm actually trying to calculate the average sale with the help of 3 different functions, 2 of which actually respect that blank row, and one of which is distinct, which ignores that blank row. And you can see the code, it is similar throughout all these 3 measures. And if I bring the first one, which is distinct, into the report, you can see that we get incorrect result because I have not enabled the relationship. And let's make sure that it is correct, and it should be many to one, and let's click on OK. And you can see that we get some values, which is average sale for each color. Now let's bring the function or the measure which is actually using the values function, and you can see that apart from the top row, for each cell of that report or the matrix, we are getting the same value. So you can see 3.67, 321, 321, but at the blank row we get some value. So this is one of the example that I actually wanted to show in this video, that if you do not pay attention to the difference that is there between distinct function and the values function, then your end result could be incorrect. So for example, if you were to share this report to your end customer, if you would have relied on the distinct function, you would have overinflated your numbers by $6, because you can see that here we see an average of 331, while with the values we are seeing average of 325. So what values is doing is it is adding that one extra blank row. That's why you see at the grand total we get a reduced number, but in that case of distinct, that number is actually inflated. And if I use the measure which is using the all function, and then in that case, as expected, you can see that we get the same grand total for each row of that matrix. Let's go to the data view so that we can verify all those calculations that we have actually seen. So if I click on the data view and I need to paste the code that I've already copied, and you can see that at the bottom we have a blank row which is summarizing 6412 rows, and for those values in the sales table that do not have a corresponding match in the dimension table, we still have a sales amount. And when we divide that sales amount by the number of rows in the sales table that are corresponding to that blank row, we get the sales amount, we get the average sales, which is $251 in this case, and that is the exact same value we see at the top in case of values. So that is what I actually wanted to confirm through this table, calculated table, that the value that we see in the matrix is actually correct. So that was all for this video, and I hope you have now understood the difference between the distinct and the values function and how they actually respect and ignore the blank row. So in the next video, I am going to show you one more example where the use of distinct or the values function can actually matter a lot. And until then, have a great day. I will see you in the next video.